This is the MediaWiki Stakeholders Group meeting here. As it is an open meeting, I think we do more like a QA, talk about what we're doing and what's all of this about. So there is no like set agenda for this. What I did was I prepared 3 slides or 4 just to give you a brief overview of what MediaWiki Stakeholders Group is and what we do. I see some faces I haven't seen before, so I think if you have any questions about the stakeholders, then this is the right place to ask them, and of course we want you to get involved with us. So the question, or basically what is this user group about? It is not responding to me. That's taken from the website. So we are a user group, which means we are some kind of formal entity within the Wikimedia movement. We target, most of our members are developers, system administrators, consultants, hosting providers, anyone who's involved with working with MediaWiki outside of the foundation. So for third parties, which is a term we want to somehow avoid because not sure what is the second party or the fourth party or the first party. So it's basically we're targeting anyone who uses MediaWiki outside of the foundation's context, so no Wikipedia, no Wikisource and stuff. Having said that, of course, we don't exclude people who also work on these projects. The opposite, we very welcome all of them. So our idea is, or our goal is to improve the situation for these people, help them work with MediaWiki, do a bit of lobbying also, so that the position, the relevance of MediaWiki as a software product is recognized in the Wikimedia world. We work on like common pain points, rewrite extensions, yeah, so there's quite a bit of scope we have. In short, we want to be a point of communication and coordination among MediaWiki users, meaning people who run MediaWiki. So that's a bit of a confusion sometimes. We are not specifically targeting like anyone who is in touch with MediaWiki somehow. It's more about the issues of people running these systems. We want to coordinate different groups of MediaWiki developers and operators, and I will say more about that later. So also we want to foster and help create an ecosystem around MediaWiki so that the extension developers have it easy to contribute their extensions. We try to work on, stuff that targets especially these people, so that is not related to Wikimedia so much. So, for example, we work on a thing called LDAP integration or LDAP authentication, which is not the main mission of Wikimedia, but a lot of MediaWiki instances out there use it to connect the user base of like their organization to the user base of MediaWiki. Facilitate implementation of MediaWiki features, improve documentation, and contribute to the development of MediaWiki. All of this is what we intend to do, what we do in parts. The group is still growing, so this is like our mission. Maybe to show you a little bit of what we did in the past. So a few years ago we conducted a MediaWiki user survey, asking people how they use MediaWiki, what they expect from MediaWiki, what the pain points are. Mark thankfully took over the maintenance of Wiki Apiary, so that is moved to the cloud services now.
It will be soon.
It will be moved to cloud service soon. And yeah, so since the original maintainers, if I'm informed correctly, did not want to maintain it anymore, so we keep the service open. We do tracks and conferences. We do also conferences. For example, we had this fantastic MediaWiki track in the Vienna hackathon, but also the Enterprise MediaWiki conference in Houston this year. And I guess one of the things that that's also an achievement of the group is that we have a good network right now. So the network is growing, and we have members of the user group that are in various positions of our stakeholders. So there are members of the foundation who also participate in MW Stake. We have contributors from large enterprises, we have small businesses, we have consultants, we have volunteers, of course, and that's so obvious. I didn't put it on there, but I should for documentation purposes. So it's not only targeting professional users, as in people get money for using this, but of course also people that use MediaWiki for their I don't know, action groups, for their pet projects, for NGOs, for any kind of volunteer-based stuff. Currently, I think these are like the most prominent projects we see, but this is not a full list, and I hope I did not miss anything. So one is, as I said, we are trying to get people together to do a standardized way of dealing with LDAP authentication. Probably that's going to be extended also to the SAML at some point, because that's the new hype of authentication. Because we feel that this is a need, and we've seen a lot of separate efforts. And one of the things we want to do as a group is to combine efforts. So for two reasons. First of all, to save effort, of course, because if there is like 10 entities trying to solve the same problem, that's just a huge waste of time, ideally. And second is to find a unified way to do this, and find a good way to do this that is sustainable and will work with future MediaWiki versions as well. Another project is Mesa, which is a MediaWiki deployment tool, and alongside that project there comes a unified MediaWiki installer. So we're working on improving the installer of MediaWiki, especially in the light of the new setups where you have a lot of services you have to set up when you want to run MediaWiki. So trying to make it easier. And I put one here because I think that perfectly fits into the mission of what we do. That's the new privacy law in the European Union, and we're currently trying to find a position of how MediaWiki relates to that GDPR, and that will probably help a lot of people out there using MediaWiki in their organizations. So how can you get involved? I guess the main entry point, if you want to get in touch, get involved in what we do, is go to MediaWiki.org and MediaWiki Stakeholders Group. You don't have to remember all of this. There is a simple solution. You can search for MW Stake, which is like our short abbreviation, and you will be redirected to that page. So MW Stake is what you want to keep in mind. And here you see a lot of entry points. You see a list of current projects not updated for the GDPR there. You see the communication channels, and that's probably one of the things that are a bit obscure about our group. We don't go to the mailing list so much for, I think, historic reasons. It just so happened. and we try new methods of communication. We had a Slack channel before, now we are on Riot, and a lot of the project work is done on the Riot channels here. So that's what you might be interested in. There's a high frequency of contributions, so we have several conversations a day on these channels. And that's also the point where people get connected. So on these channels, we have the multiple stakeholders I talked about. So there are people from the foundation, there are people from large enterprises, there are volunteers, and they all work together and try to solve like immediate problems or issues. On this page, you can also see, as we are a formal group, we have to do some kind of reporting. It's quite easy. I do this. It's not hard because we don't have any finances involved yet. So we just can compile a list of things we did. That might change in some point. And yeah. So apart from these lists on Riot, there's also a monthly meeting we conduct, which is done. It's a video chat session in a system called Blue Jeans. That's not hard to set up. You just follow a link and then it opens up. Because Chris always sets up the sessions for us. And that is a task on Fabricator. I opened it. Now, where is it? Fabricator.
It's also on the calendar, but don't understand.
How do I do this? MW stick. So we have. How do I get to the calendar here?
There's meetup right there.
Let's do this. So we have. We also have a website, MediaWiki.org, and there we have the meeting. There is no Fabricator here.
Someone should link to it. It's linked to from here. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, look.
Oh, sorry.
You want the...
The point is, it goes right to there's the Blue Jeans link at the bottom.
Yeah.
Click that link and it'll take you to the...
Okay. Okay, I click whatever.
Fine.
So I'm usually invited by Mark personally, so I don't have to know what the...
So there's your Fabricator.
Yay. Okay. That's a monthly task, and you can see the previous and next buttons here, so you can always find the next meeting for this. Yeah, so that is the end of my fabulous presentation of the stakeholders, because I think most of you know what we're doing. And now for me it's like open, so the question is, for people who are not actively involved here, what would you expect of the group? Do you want to participate? Do you have any pressing issues about MediaWiki you want to discuss, which we should tackle? That's also a question. So, for example, one thing we are heavily discussing right now is, again, extension management composer. That's also one of the things we try to facilitate in some ways.
And there's a session at 7 o'clock tonight. I'm not sure which room it is, but to discuss the extension management or see that.
Exactly.
With sidebar about composer, right?
With a sidebar about composer.
Well, you've been talking about composer.
Yes, I have. We can talk about it.
I think it's right in this room.
Is it here?
Let's see if I can.
Yes. There it is.
Here it is. So you only have to stay until 7.
GDPR.
And yeah, so this is basically, if you stay here, you virtually practically involved in the stakeholders. Yeah, so is there any, are there any things that, I mean, are you all users of MediaWiki, and what bugs you most about the software?
Nobody else has anything. Mark, you said, I was interested in the LDAP integration. You said it has to be moved forward now. But I also know that, for example, I thought Robert Vogel was working on it a bit.
What
on LDAP integration from Maleveld.
Yeah,
it's part of the same project.
It's the same project. Is there any, I don't know,
Any
what's the
progress?
status, what's the schedule, when can we use it?
We were just talking about that before this. You're talking about LDAP, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. Just out there, Robert and I were working on it. Just now we're trying to merge some changes that I have with his work. And I need to deploy it for a customer of mine, so it'll be soon.
Oh, right.
So one of the questions about it that I think needs some discussion and socialization is the naming. So there is an existing LDAP authentication extension that still sort of works, but it doesn't. My understanding is the issues that it has have to do with single sign-on. I think that's no longer working ever since MediaWiki 1.7, if I'm not mistaken. So some people are able to still use some of the simple functionality. So the idea behind this LDAP rewrite is, first of all, to get a fully working version of LDAP authentication again, but also to create a uniform interface to LDAP services that can be used for querying the directory and to get user attributes and groups, as well as what are the other extensions? So the rewrite of LDAP authentication is on top of my pluggable auth extension, which also it differentiates between authentication and authorization. So I already have an existing LDAP authorization extension, and that will work with the LDAP authentication. So this is a complete rewrite of LDAP authentication. So the existing LDAP authentication uses camel case. And we were thinking of reusing the name, but with LDAP being capitalized. But I do not, but yeah, exactly. And that seems like something that needs some community input.
Can't just take over the names.
We could take over the name LDAP authentication with the camel case. All of the other LDAP extensions in the suite use LDAP uppercase, but we could also switch them, but the purist in me thinks that's wrong because LDAP is otherwise, that's okay. I can be pragmatic. But yeah, I
just think that, just having a name differentiated in
in the case is completely wrong. Yeah, I agree.
No, I would.
It's a setup for user confusion.
That doesn't make sense. But if you say the old one is discontinued because Ryan Lane, who wrote the old one, has it open for new maintenance, then take it over, but fix the spelling mistake. So yeah, that would be one.
But I also want to make sure that existing users of the existing LDAP authentication are comfortable that the new one works for them. They're going to have to update their interface. It's going to be different. Yeah. The configuration aspect of it. And reusing the name means the other one goes away. It's currently not maintained anyways. Much. There's no active maintenance.
So, just as an aside though, the current one is deployed to Wikimedia Foundation Wiki, so it can't 100% go away.
Right. Unless the Wikimedia Foundation chooses to use the newer, better. Yeah, I know.
An unlikely event anyone gets around to doing that.
So
Well,
this is
should,
exactly why I raised the issue, because the naming does have all sorts of implications.
So the current, the old LDAP implementation is basically a patch written rather hastily after the authorization system changed. and I don't think it's really stable in a ways that you can see it. So it doesn't fully support the old extent of the LDAP authentication. It's at least to the state
It
of my
supports
knowledge.
Wikimedia's uses.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just saying you can't delete the extension. while
Yeah, right.
Wikimedia is still
Well,
using it.
Yeah.
But the question, I mean, speaking rationally, I think eventually even the foundation should move to like the extension that's
Or they'll move to
been for
WordPress.
Pardon?
Yeah,
Or move to WordPress. Yeah, rewrite in Java.
Ideally, I think they would be using all that to begin with. But that's a digression, I guess I shouldn't go into.
Yeah, so we can't necessarily deprecate the old one. It's probably not a good idea to differentiate the new one and the old one only by the case of the LDAP in it.
Yeah.
Because
For
Windows,
many reasons, including which tools like Git, I don't know, will even,
Git's
How's
fine
the
with it.
operating system?
It depends if you're using Windows,
Yeah,
Mac, or
Windows.
Linux.
Windows
Yeah.
won't work.
It's Windows.
I
Windows
think
causes
Mac
problems.
actually is case insensitive too.
It's
Oh,
case
wow.
sensitive,
yeah,
but
so
case
it's whatever case you
insensitive.
request is what case you'll get.
What,
and
when,
so-
did, when did they do the FreeBSD for Mac?
I know, torture.
It's like brain damage.
Yeah, so that is not a good idea. But having an LDAP authentication and an LDAP authentication 2 is not necessarily a good approach either. So,
It is better though, because at least it indicates which one comes after, but until maybe one of them gets
I
dropped, the
have
other gets
to-
picked up.
and then why is there 2, and yeah,
I have a lot of negative experience with dynamic page list 1, 2, and 3.
yeah. I was just gonna say that's the other example that
If
was.
there's something about it that would actually distinguish it in another way, like how it does things differently or something like that, that might
Pluggable
be.
LDAP authentication.
But does it like run
There we
everything the
go.
same way?
I think we really solved the problem, I like that.
You just want to push your brand. Oh my word.
And to be fair, that might actually be a good solution, so.
Perhaps.
I was gonna ask if like the old one's not maintained, is there a reason like why not to take over maintenance of that one and kind of change it?
It's a different architecture. Well, there's no reason that we couldn't just write our stuff on top of it, you know, basically delete all the old files and Git and add all the new ones in Git. But as Brian says, you know, it's a different configuration, and so if the foundation continues to use the old version.
Foundation will not be happy if you delete something they're currently using.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same way, but also if no one's maintaining it, I'm sure like they would be happy that like someone's now actively maintaining that extension. If you could like make it kind of backwards compatible at least for a bit and then kind of push it over.
We
Yeah,
did talk
definitely.
about making it backwards compatible and working on that with a transition script, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That you run a script and it converts from
Right.
old
The,
config variables to new.
right.
And then you'd only need one extension.
So that's a possibility. You know, there's still that little bit of, it doesn't like the capitalization, so I can tell you that that one's there.
Let it go. Let it go.
I'm sure like the tech dev PM would be happy about this, like we're trying to find maintainers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're obviously invested in LDAP, so it seems like a natural fit. You can make it work.
Yeah. And so the suite of extensions would be the LDAP provider, which is the glue that all of them use. LDAP authentication and LDAP authorization, both of which integrate with pluggable auth. LDAP user info, which gives you a way to query LDAP, get back properties, and then LDAP groups, which allow you to assign MediaWiki groups based upon LDAP group information. Am I missing any?
I don't think so, but one reason that I didn't want to continue to maintain the old one was because it is old and it has grown and evolved organically, and that would just, you know, there's a lot in there. So while I often advocate taking over other projects and maintaining them, this is one case where I'm like, this is too much. Not everyone cares about groups, for example. So why should they pull in the whole, you know, all of that code? Yeah, so it's
It makes sense.
easier to document and set up if it's split up a little bit better.
Also extensibility. So if you do project integration projects, more often than not, you come across things that are not foreseen by the extension. So I don't know. A user wants you to put the organizational unit they have in the LDAP information on the user profiles page, and it's rather hard to extend the old extension because of its architecture. I'm not saying it's, I mean, it's a very good piece of software, or it was at this time, and Ryan Lane was one of the best developers we had around here. But since like 5 years, the architecture of like PHP, or the state-of-the-art of architecture has evolved. It's no longer state-of-the-art. It's a lot of spaghetti code.
And the authentication infrastructure within MediaWiki.
The infrastructure has changed, and now it's way easier to move forward by rewriting it instead of improving it.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of like, it's just one of these things that seems like a vicious cycle of like, we let something get old and then we rebuild it, and then we don't get people to migrate, and so we just keep building up, like building new versions of things. It's like, you know, eventually you have to bite the bullet and not do it.
So I think migrating and reusing the old name would be great. What I'd want to do though is go through a beta testing phase to make sure. And so the question is, does anybody here, you know, we certainly know that it's used within the foundation. Does anybody else use LDAP, the current LDAP authentication, that would be willing and interested in testing the new?
I can do it.
Well, you and I already have done, you know, I already have it, I have an instance that tests it with the foundation LDAP. So
Cindy,
yeah,
we will.
anybody who has a Wikitech account can log in, I've got a test for you.
You could
It
like
works.
develop it as a branch if you really want to eventually take over the extension. Like you can first have it as a branch and then eventually replace master.
Whoever wants to continue using version 1 and maintain version 1 can do it.
But how does the branch naming then work with the auto branching of the MediaWiki releases?
It doesn't.
Yeah, that is the correct answer.
Well,
You can make
I
them
sort of knew the
yourself.
answer to that question before I asked it, but yeah.
It kind of depends on how the foundation updates the extensions. Do they do this on a branch basis? Like when
We don't use the release branches, but we do make, every week we make a new branch based on master. But I don't think that's written in stone. In the past, there was like central, this was an exception at one point. Like, I think there have been exceptions in the past where they basically just branch or something out from master.
It sounds like it's a problem that's probably fairly easy. So
Yeah.
you just have more branches and the script shouldn't be that hard to
Yeah,
change.
like I'm sure it's like a 2-line shell script or something.
I think it's a thing that can be solved.
Yeah, but the idea was like,
And
this
how many
basic idea
is
that.
actually used LDAP? Is it basically Wikitech?
Just
So that would be, you know, that would be relatively easy to,
For like one thing we can do. Yeah.
so if we can test.
And the Wikimedia Germany wiki probably uses it as well, actually. When I think about it.
So we know somebody who can
but
help
they're not a
us to test
foundation
that.
wiki, we don't care about them.
But it could be extra testing. I assume they use it.
Yeah, we can do the testing.
Yeah, so that's really where I'd really like to go with this next, is to try and have it tested as widely as possible.
Okay, any other?
Wait.
Yeah.
So which one's the old one?
LDAP authentication, capital L.
And what's
D.
LDAP authentication plugin? Or is that the old one? Or is that something even
I don't even know what that is.
Okay.
Which is unfortunate, because if I want to call it pluggable LDAP authentication, if there's something already called LDAP authentication plugin, that's sad.
Delete it.
This feature chaos monkey remove, you can see if anybody complains.
I think the new one should replace LDAP authentication.
lots of words in the English alphabet, I'm sure we can come up with the unique name.
That's true.
LDOP authentication flow. LDOP authentication naming changes.
Yeah, I do think it gets confusing when you have too many extensions that do the same thing with slightly different names,
It does.
like simple SAML and simple SAML, or simple SAML off and simple SAML.
Well, yeah, but then there's those people who name their extension after the software that they're using, like Simple SAML PHP. How am I
Who would do that?
What are we talking about?
Okay, that's fine.
That's why I would name it simple SAML.
That's because simple SAML auth is already taken.
Yeah.
I
Should have been pluggable SAML.
Pluggable SAML, you see?
Simple SAML.
Simple SAML. Or just SAML.
Yeah. Take it over.
Okay,
All,
I didn't ask you guys when I named it.
all your SAML belong to us.
Yeah, so that's the one thing is the LDAP. We've got a session on GDPR, we've got a session on extension management.
Yeah.
It would be great to get everybody to join us on Riot, because we do chat all the time.
Yeah, another chat out.
Absolutely.
Yes, but
We
the
moved
point
over
is,
to
this is
Slack,
not
though.
Slack, and
That's
we're
good,
getting
because I
rid
don't
of
like
Slack.
Slack.
We were using
Getting
Slack
rid of Slack.
until EMW Con in Houston.
And, yeah, and we're also serving as a test bed for Wikimedia, because they're considering.
Wikimedia will use IRC until it dies.
Yes, and there will be a bridge to Riot.
It's just that the bridge doesn't work really well right now.
No, but it does if you have a dedicated
We have a
server.
IRC channel server mildly or mostly usable due to bot spam. I don't think the relay would complicate things further.
I mean, that's a point here. So the reason why we are not using IRC is because we want to connect with the outside world. And it's really, really hard to convince someone from the shiny organizational world to use IRC or to set up an IRC client on their computers. I guess what Mark said, and we can also serve as a test bed here. I think the migration from Slack to Riot was rather seamlessly. It worked quite well.
Migration there was just user migrating, not conversations or anything.
Yeah. But I mean, the switching over of users from
Right.
one to the other system. So.
Yeah, and Riot is not quite as shiny as Slack,
Mhm.
but it's more palatable to
It's more
Gergo.
shiny than
So
IRC.
if non-shininess
It's
is
more
a
shiny than
criterion
IRC.
for acceptance.
Gergo is working on, he has a ticket to spin up a Riot server
yes, that's
for the foundation so that they can get better throughput to IRC.
There's really a throughput issue? Like, I mean, like, these
It-
protocols are text-based
They
protocols.
literally have
Made
one
in the
machine for
80s.
Freenode.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's just surprising that like a protocol made in like '89 has throughput issues.
No,
Well,
it's not the protocol, unless Riot was,
So it's not IRC's fault, it's
no, it's
Riot's
not
fault.
IRC's
No,
fault.
not at all. It does weird things like when a new person joins an IRC conversation, it takes a while for their account to be recognized by Riot, and so their messages don't wind up being bridged. And so all you see is one side of the conversation, and you're wondering why this person is talking to themselves. Which is really not good. So we have one room that bridges the MediaWiki L. No, the MediaWiki
The general
IRC.
IRC channel.
channel.
I actually tried to open it and it says the room doesn't exist.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I followed the link from the stakeholders page.
Well, it
It
could very
says
well be that the link to the state.
MediaWiki general matrix.org doesn't exist.
Oh, I'm in
It
it.
should.
I just joined it.
Oh, so maybe it's private?
No?
MediaWiki, let's see, let me look at the
Let's
room
do
name.
something I don't.
Hashmark
Let's do a live
MediaWiki
demo.
general matrix.org.
Oh no, wait, that's MW Stake General.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
MWState
it's
channel.
MediaWiki, it's just pound MediaWiki at : matrix.
Yeah, but
So-
the MW Stake general is a different channel.
Right, it is.
Yeah, MW State General.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so-
working.
Yeah, the only one that bridges IRC is the MediaWiki.
MediaWiki, just MediaWiki.
Mhm, yeah.
Not MediaWiki General. So maybe, it could be that the link here is broken.
Yeah.
Let's see.
it seems it was broken,
Yeah.
so the general part will be.
Yeah, the general
Just
part.
the general, take
Okay.
that off.
Yeah. But that one's flaky anyways, so I'm not necessarily.
It's a wiki, edit it.
Yeah. I don't have my laptop out, but Marcus is going to.
So that's what the general MW stake looks. I didn't read, so if there's something that's making you laugh, I don't know.
Oh, it's in German.
It's
How
in
did
there.
that happen?
Pardon?
It's
The
in German.
interface.
That's because I'm a native German speaker,
I know that.
No,
Um,
really?
somehow.
Yeah.
Not really. I speak a dialect, so people, native Germans don't understand me. Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a bunch of rooms which you can see listed on the page down there in the sidebar.
Right. We'll take off that one after this session.
Yeah, or just remove the general if people want to try. We might want to put a banner there saying it's a little flaky.
Yeah.
But the hope is that once we spin up a server, it will
Yeah.
be not flaky.
Yeah. So, and you can see that we do have some participants there.
The thing about the Riot Bridge and all that is we are talking with one of the product managers, I guess, at Matrix, and he's very responsive. So.
Yeah, there's a channel that we created there just for communicating with the.
So, and
Matrix
so
users.
some of the Matrix developers seem to be, they like this case. Hey, Wikimedia is a big organization. They're using it, so like to help.
I'm sorry, now you have to pick me up. What's the relation, the connection between Matrix and Riot?
Matrix is the protocol, Riot's the interface. Instead of like XMPP, which was XML messages back and forth, Matrix is JSON, so it's cool.
So it's cool. It's JSON, it must be good. So, but the other thing that would be great is to have folks dialing into the monthly meetings. Do you want to talk anything about incorporation?
Yeah, well, I was, maybe a few sentences. I was trying to keep this out as a major thing, but of course we do have internal stuff in the user group as well. And one is becoming a formal body. Those of you who follow the group know that we have this plan for like a few years. But still, it's on our to-do list because without being a formal incorporated, like legal entity, we cannot process money properly. Currently the MW stake, as I said, is somewhat moneyless, or money runs through private persons.
So one idea that, we're working with Brian, and Brian is a guy in California, and his wife is a CPA, so she can help out a lot with this incorporation thing. One thing that was suggested was that we designate, because we had this problem with EMWCon in Houston, that we designate someone to hold, an account. If it takes us any longer to get, incorporated, then we designate someone, you're gonna manage the account, and, so join MW Stake, you might be able to hold our money.
Yeah.
I've probably invited the wrong people.
I want to hold your money.
Yeah, but the deal is that if the organization sponsors a conference like EMWCon and there's any funds left over, we would like to be able to park them somewhere in the interim until we have an opportunity. They could benefit the next
Right.
conference. We could, if there's enough money, have a small hackathon. There's the work that's going on Meza. We keep talking about organizing a Meza workshop.
So that is one thing, the grant thing. We have been talking about getting grants from the foundation applied for a grant. There's a grant that NASA gave that I'm going to be working on, and hopefully WMF will also contribute. So that may also lend us legitimacy.
You want to talk about that project? It's an interesting project.
It's mad. Multilateral asynchronous bidirectional synchronization.
No, that
It's a MediaWiki remote forget. So, and there's people who are interested in getting MediaWiki, a working installation of MediaWiki on the space station, for example, that could sync up with Houston. And then there are also people who like WikiFundy, takes wiki, the wiki experience, the wiki editing experience to disconnected places and tries to get them to contribute back to Wikipedia. And right now they have all that, that's fine, but there's no automated way to sync up, so it's cut and paste and a lot of manual work. So that you lose attribution of edits that way and other things. So this would solve that, hopefully. That's the idea.
Yeah, so NASA's interested for getting a copy of both Wikipedia and their also internally used wikis up on the International Space Station. The first step in that is just to get read-only copies up. But the goal is the next step would be allowing updates to be shipped when things change on the ground version. But ideally, you'd also like to be, to have an astronaut who comes in from a spacewalk be able to update the wiki with information, because that's what they use their EVA wikis for, is collecting information about how tools are used and
So
procedures.
the best example that I always use of how you would update the wiki from a spacewalk is the sharps, where they have a catalog of sharp points around the space station that is not often updated. But if you have a wiki there that you're updating it, the guy can just go in from a spacewalk and he says, oh, I found a new sharp. So.
And that's stuff that could be, life critical.
Yeah.
So the idea to use, so your idea is to use Git for that, like basically?
To do the synchronization.
To do the synchronization, yes. That's already working.
Oh, it's already working.
But there's a lot of manual stuff that has to go on. So I'm working on a proof of concept that allows you to do it without all the manual stuff. But it is just a proof of concept.
So a couple of weeks ago, Darren Welsh got funding from NASA to fund their work on the space station application.
Okay.
And then,
But just a proof of concept work.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at right now. I want to make everything,
and then Mark's looking to, fund his contribution to it. But I think it's fascinating, the wiki funding aspect, that the same technology that could potentially help to synchronize wikis with the International Space Station can also be used for folks who want to be able to contribute from remote villages.
Yeah.
That's awesome to me, that the same solution can help those two very diverse use cases.
So is it a Git repo that like the entire MySQL database is in, or you
No.
have individual Git repos for each article, or how are you doing?
No, as a matter of fact, it's interesting you mentioned that. At SMWCon in Frankfurt, there was someone who had set up individual repos for every page. No, it's not that. The remote is basically an API client. It goes and gets the changes from the MediaWiki API, stores them as revisions in Git. You could actually check it out onto your own desktop and edit the files in a text editor, and then check them back in, and then push them to the wiki that way.
Okay, so the Git's just a transport mechanism rather than like.
Right.
Okay. Interesting.
Transport, and it helps with the conflict
Just I was
resolution.
gonna say, okay, yeah. How are the conflict resolutions, are they gonna be handled in like the MediaWiki UI, or how is that?
That is ultimately the plan.
Yeah.
That is not, so probably for my pilot, I'm gonna say, just accept everything from this side and they win all the time.
Okay.
But yeah, eventually you want to have a UI where you say, okay, well, one thing Darren suggested was we can use templates to mark. Are you familiar with Git? How diffs are? So instead of the Git diff conflict thing, you would say this put a template around the top part. This is from that one. And template around the bottom part. This is from us. And then you could look at them manually and know which one was which.
Yeah.
And then we would apply a category or something saying that these are the pages that
Right,
have
yeah.
conflicts resolved.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. That's so good. Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty. I mean, I often wonder, like, so it just like this is like blue sky stuff, but I often wonder, like, about like since Git is like such a good paradigm, like the developers use all the time, anyways, and we are doing like revisions internally. I just wonder if there's like it's worthwhile considering like should we be changing the entire way that we're storing articles to be more like Git that way, like something like this you just get for free, kind of, because like if everything worked internally with Git, like Git just automatically has all these capabilities.
You'll have to talk to someone besides me about that.
Yeah, I know.
There was a discussion on the WikiTechL mailing list a long time ago about that. And I believe there was some concerns like naively doing that would not be performant, like the performant path for Git and performance assumptions of Git are very different from performance assumptions around how Wikipedia is used. And especially for, if the idea is extended where it commonly is to have like everyone working on their own thing and then merging it all together in like a massive distributed manner. I think it tends to get slow when you start having very big repos.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, it's like I mean, there are ways to get around that. Like you have to do like be packing it and leveling like the.
I'm sure there's lots of smart things you could do, but like that naive approach is, from my understanding, probably not workable. But you could probably fix that, right?
So you sound like you know a lot about Git. I might have to ask you some questions while I'm doing this. Like, well.
Yeah. No, it's pretty. Yeah, I mean, I played around. Like most of my development was always using Git. Like I used Subversion and I hated it. Like and eventually everybody started using Git, which made everything a lot nicer. But
I miss Subversion.
what? Man, just like checking out everything and locking and no one else being able to do anything, which was like crazy.
Oh yeah, the locking, that was a stupid thing. Although I do remember working on something, having to do something else, so making a giant patch file for myself just so I could reapply like 10 seconds later. But it was simple.
Yeah.
Actually, what I missed most about Subversion was that was before we had like code review, and it was just so easy just to like put my shitty code in the thing, and it was all good.
Well, yeah, but then I did that a few times and got chewed out. Maybe your shitty code wasn't as bad as mine.
So should I take this as the final note of the session? We should opt for, we should argue for migrating to Subversion again. Okay, I think we're about done. We should leave some minutes for the room to change.
The only other thing I wanted to mention briefly that we didn't talk too much about, and it can be a future discussion, but Meza, the installer that NASA's working on, the other NASA project. And there is a lot of promise in that, but also a lot of work yet to be done. So, but that's another project that.
So how can people contribute?
There's a Meza room on Riot.
Can you explain how it does it in 15 seconds?
Ansible.
It's a set of Ansible scripts.
You got 2 minutes, that's no problem.
It's a set of Ansible scripts. It started with, and they run on Red Hat and CentOS. And we have a cache out there to do a Debian port. It incorporates, they built their stuff. I gave some feedback based on the Ansible scripts I built. It's wiki farm aware, and so very easy to set up a new wiki. It keeps things partitioned. You can have shared, global extensions as well as per wiki enabled extensions. The limitation, I would say at this point, is that you still need, it's not for the faint of heart. You know, it's automated, but it's still not as simple as it needs to be to get folks to be able to just, you know, type a couple things and boom, they've got a wiki farm.
They haven't mastered the point and click yet.
It's not even close to point and click.
So the one thing I'll just tack on to the end of this is, over the last 6 months or so for Wikibase and Wikidata, we now have a collection of Docker images for
And that's who
everything.
needs to talk to you. You need to talk to him.
Yes, we have a collection of Docker
He's
images.
your Docker ninja.
Good, perfect.
For the query service updater, MediaWiki with Wikibase, and some other extensions which you would want for Wikibase.
Yeah.
And it can be as simple as if you have Docker, downloading one file, changing a couple of passwords so they're not the defaults, and then just running the command and you have it all set up. And so for easy installation of Wikibase, that's sort of the path we're going down. Yeah.
Is there any, so the thing I always worry about with Docker, and I know it's silly, is vendor lock-in.
Just to get that.
Vendor lock-in.
Start.
I don't know how implements the open container initiative. So for example, if you